She used to be his everything, his love, his dream, his reason to live. And then she betrayed him, choosing someone else, younger, brighter, better. He went through hell to stand back up, forgot her, and built a new, happy family. But 6 years later, she came back. With empty eyes, broken, holding 2 children in her arms, begging for help. What is a man supposed to do when the one who crushed him to pieces shows up again? Save the woman who once betrayed him? Or close the door forever? This is a story of pain, revenge, and the line where compassion ends. A story that proves some mistakes come with a price too high to pay, and sometimes there are no second chances. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watch this video from. Now, let's get started. If someone were caught betraying a partner, you'd think they'd recognize that any path leading back to reconciliation had long since gone up in flames, reduced to nothing but embers of broken trust. How could anyone bring themselves to stand before the very person they wounded, facing the destruction they left behind? And yet, here I am, watching such an attempt unfold. This isn't something happening in the present. It's a memory from 6 years ago, one that I believed was buried for good. My first wife, Aria, the woman who abandoned me for a younger man, has resurfaced after all these years. I am 42 now, married again, and a proud father to a daughter who will celebrate her first birthday in just a few months. But the story I am about to share takes place in my early 30s, during my first marriage. I met Aria when I was 30, and she was 24. Our connection was instant, sparked at a party where we first crossed paths. She was just beginning her journey in fashion design, while I was transitioning into entrepreneurship after spending half a decade in the software industry. At the time, my business wasn't a massive success, nor was I raking in millions, but it provided a comfortable life. Many details of that period have blurred over time, but I do remember that within a few months of dating, Aria moved into my apartment. Before her, I had lived alone. Aria had an undeniable allure. Looking back, I realize it was her infectious energy that captivated me most. She was extroverted, effortlessly charming, and breathtakingly beautiful. The first time I saw her at that party, she turned heads wherever she went. That kind of magnetism wasn't something you could ignore. Some might say it's shallow to acknowledge that her beauty played a role in my attraction to her, but when you're young, yes, 29 is still young, you often lack the wisdom to see beyond appearances. And sometimes, that lack of maturity comes at a cost, something I would come to understand later. We dated for 2 years before getting married in an extravagant ceremony. Aria had always dreamed of a wedding straight out of a fairy tale, and she made sure every detail matched her vision. Perfection was her obsession. Since childhood, she had envisioned the flawless wedding, and when the time came, she orchestrated it down to the last detail. It was a financial strain on me, though I didn't fully grasp the weight of it then. I was too focused on fulfilling my role as the ideal husband. For the first 2 years, everything appeared to be fine. I don't recall any significant conflicts during that initial period. But after our second anniversary, a shift began. Aria enrolled in a master's program for fashion, and with it, her demeanor started to change. She was driven, determined to make her mark in Hollywood or, at the very least, work for a prominent television network. Surrounded by younger classmates, most in their early 20s and fresh into adulthood, she found herself enchanted by their carefree energy. She became fascinated by their spontaneity, their hunger for adventure, and soon she started voicing regrets about marrying so young. At first, I dismissed her words as fleeting discontent. I assumed she'd outgrow the excitement of late-night parties and casual flings, eventually appreciating the depth of real commitment. But instead of fading, her new lifestyle only became more entrenched. Weekend getaways, late-night social events, and nights spent away from home. Meanwhile, I was immersed in my business, tackling its challenges head-on, believing my personal life was stable, or so I thought. Her program lasted 18 months, and I expected things to settle once she graduated. But even after finishing school, she remained caught up in the same whirlwind. Around that time, my business hit a rough patch, and I found myself struggling with debt. Rather than standing by my side, Aria ridiculed my choice to pursue entrepreneurship, conveniently overlooking the fact that I had been the one keeping us afloat financially. Even when she had worked, her earnings had been modest compared to mine. I had taken on our financial burdens willingly so she could follow her dreams without worry. Then there was Logan, a fellow student from her program who managed to secure a job at one of the city's top design houses. Aria became infatuated with him. She started drawing comparisons between us, his budding career, his confidence, his humor, even his physique. Meanwhile, I was clocking in 12 to 14-hour days, building something meaningful. I had let my health take a back seat, something I regret now, and I certainly didn't have the sculpted jawline or toned body that Logan apparently did. Gradually, she found in him what she no longer saw in me. He was an intern with plenty of free time, someone who could offer her his undivided attention. Maybe he was more charming, maybe he had an effortless charisma that I lacked in my exhausted state. Eventually, she made her choice. One evening, I came home to find a note stuck to the refrigerator. The words on the paper shattered me. "I'm sorry. I can't do this in person, so I'm leaving this note. I'm moving to LA with Logan. He makes me laugh. He makes me feel alive. Something you stopped doing long ago. You're not the man I married. You've lost your spark, your looks. You're fading into the background. Logan is younger, more attractive, and he excites me. I want to experience life with someone like him." My world crumbled. But the thing about pain is that it doesn't last forever. I threw myself into my work, using the heartbreak as fuel. Ironically, it was in that period of turmoil that my business truly flourished. Looking back now, it was a disguised blessing. 2 years later, at a business event, I met Jenny. What started as a friendship grew into something more, and eventually, we built a life together. Now we have a 10-month-old daughter, and life is everything I could have hoped for. Jenny is everything Aria wasn't: kind, compassionate, and above all, my true partner. The wounds of the past had long since faded into the background, until last week, when Aria unexpectedly returned. But that's a story for another day. Last week, something unexpected happened that unearthed a flood of memories I thought I had long buried. Aria reappeared. Yes, my first wife, the woman who had left me for a younger man, suddenly showed up at my office, asking for help. At first glance, I barely recognized her. The vibrant and self-assured woman I had once loved was now but a fragile remnant of who she used to be. She looked drained, her skin pale and her eyes hollow. She clutched a baby in her arms while a little girl, no more than 3 years old, sat quietly in the waiting area outside. If I hadn't noticed her sitting there, looking utterly defeated, I might have denied ever knowing her. But when she stepped inside my office, all pretense collapsed, and she broke down entirely. Her daughter remained in the reception area while she entered with the infant. Her tears came freely, apologies tumbling from her lips in a voice thick with sorrow. Seeing her after 6 years stirred emotions I hadn't expected. The last time I had looked at her, I had been in love with her, but now she was nothing more than a stranger. I had never had the chance to resent her, to despise her, or even to fully grasp the pain she had inflicted upon me. She told me she had returned to the home we once shared, only to discover it was no longer hers. I had sold it years ago after marrying Jenny, my second wife, and moved into a better house in a wealthier neighborhood. She had no idea I had remarried. Then, she began to recount her life after she had left me, how Logan, the man she had chosen over me, had treated her cruelly, especially after their daughter was born. She suspected him of cheating while she was pregnant, and when she confronted him, he dismissed her with heartless mockery. He was 6 years younger than her, and he weaponized that fact against her, belittling her appearance and age. She had become financially dependent on him and had no means of escape, forcing her to endure his mistreatment. Things spiraled further during her second pregnancy. He had been completely indifferent, never even visiting her in the hospital when she gave birth. Instead, he hurled insults at her, calling her degrading names: fat ant, old woman, cow. The humiliation was relentless. Eventually, she made the same choice she once had with me. She walked away. When she had left me, I had hoped she would regret it, that she would feel the weight of what she had done. But hearing her story now, seeing the suffering she had endured, I felt no sense of triumph, only pity. She begged for my forgiveness, saying fate had dealt her the same pain she had once inflicted upon me. She admitted she had been reckless, blind to the consequences of her actions. I told her I had already let go of the past, that I had moved on. Overcome with emotion, she grasped my hands, pressing them against her tear-streaked face, pleading for another chance. She promised to be the wife she had failed to be before. I gently withdrew my hands and told her the truth. I was married, and I had a child. I turned a framed photo on my desk toward her, letting reality speak for itself. She picked it up, staring at it through her tears, before breaking down completely. I had no words of comfort to offer, so I remained silent. She rose to her feet, her voice barely a whisper, as she admitted I had been her last hope. But after seeing that picture, she realized she had none left. Without another word, she walked out. As soon as she was gone, I called Jenny and told her everything. The encounter left me shaken, unable to focus, so I left work early. A heavy sadness settled in my chest. Jenny listened patiently and reassured me. She reminded me that Arya's suffering was not my burden to carry, that the choices she had made had led her here. I agreed. She had built her own misery. Yet, part of me expected her to reach out again. But she never did. I don't know where she is now. I know I've moved on. I love Jenny and our daughter. And yet, Arya's sudden return and the devastation she carried with her continue to linger in my thoughts. Over the past week, I have spoken about it with Jenny more than I probably should. She is not just my wife. She is my closest friend. But I don't want to burden her with these thoughts. Jenny trusts in our marriage, but she is also human. I don't want her to think I still have feelings for Arya. I don't. But something about Arya's reappearance, about the sheer depth of her despair, has unsettled me in a way I can't shake. The first update. It has been over 5 months since I first shared my story, how my ex-wife, the woman who had left me without hesitation, returned seeking another chance. When she realized I had a new family, she disappeared again. I hadn't heard from her since, until a few days ago. She showed up at my office once more. I was in the middle of an important meeting when my assistant handed me a note. Arya is here. Any concentration I had was instantly shattered. The meeting no longer mattered. I wrapped it up as quickly as possible and went to see her. She looked even worse than before. This time she admitted that after discovering I had moved on, she had gone back to Logan in a desperate attempt to salvage their relationship. But things had only gotten worse. She had recently learned that Logan had been involved with multiple women from his workplace. When she confronted him, he didn't even attempt to lie. He admitted it freely, telling her she was no longer attractive enough for him. Then, things escalated. He started to get physically violent. Now, she had nowhere to turn. She came to me asking for financial help. She explained that she had been searching for a job but hadn't been able to find anything stable. For the past 3 years, she had been out of the workforce, dedicating herself to raising their daughter. That gap in employment was now working against her, making it nearly impossible to secure a job. And if that wasn't devastating enough, she revealed something shocking. Logan had never actually married her. He had never believed in marriage, and had convinced her it was unnecessary. That was why she had once referred to Peggy as rudimentary. She had thrown everything away for a man who had never even considered making her his wife. And now, she was paying the ultimate price. She now regrets her decision, realizing that because they never married, she has no legal claim to financial assistance from him following their separation. Had they tied the knot, she would have been eligible for alimony. When I asked her how much she needed, she remained silent. Without pressing further, I handed her a check for $30,000. I told her this was the most I could offer and advised her to use it for temporary lodging, perhaps a motel, while she figured out her next steps. I suggested she consider any job that could help her regain her footing, even if it wasn't in the fashion industry. She took the money gratefully and left. This time, I found myself hesitating to tell Jenny about my meeting with Arya. However, after thinking it over, I realized that keeping it a secret might backfire if she found out through someone else. That evening, as soon as I got home, Jenny immediately sensed something was off and asked what was wrong. I decided to be honest and told her about Arya's request for financial help. Her response was measured. She didn't criticize me for helping, but firmly warned me against allowing Arya to take advantage of my generosity. I wasn't upset by Jenny's reaction because I understood where she was coming from. Her concerns were valid, and I reassured her that my actions were purely out of compassion, not lingering feelings. While she seemed slightly uneasy at first, she quickly moved past it. Now, on to my second update. I noticed some speculation in the comments, people suggesting that I might still have feelings for Arya, that I might take her back, or worse, betray Jenny. Let me be absolutely clear, none of that is even a possibility. Arya's sudden reappearance caught me off guard, especially given how dire her situation seemed. Even when she reached out again, I wasn't eager to see her. The only reason I offered any help was because it felt like the humane thing to do, something I would do for anyone in genuine need. But make no mistake, I haven't forgotten how she once treated me, the way she belittled me, laughed at my efforts, and discarded me after everything I had done for her. Those were some of the darkest times of my life, and being left after 4 years together wasn't something I could just erase from memory. So, to put any doubts to rest, I would never put at risk the life I've built with Jenny. I have firm boundaries when it comes to Arya, and I won't let history repeat itself. I'm not trying to target anyone with these words, I just want to set the record straight. I'll share further updates if anything significant happens. Now, on to the third update. I want to thank everyone for their feedback. After reading through the comments on my last update, I decided to have a completely open conversation with Jenny. I reassured her of my unwavering love and loyalty, making it clear that I would never do anything to jeopardize our marriage. Jenny is a strong and confident woman, but I didn't want even a shred of doubt lingering in her mind. Being honest with her lifted a huge weight off my shoulders. She told me she trusted me, but admitted that Arya's presence in my life made her uneasy. It wasn't jealousy. It was the fear that Arya might try to manipulate her way back in. Jenny has been my anchor, the one who stood beside me during my lowest moments. She is the mother of my child. I would never do anything to break her trust. About a week later, Arya contacted me again, this time asking for help in securing a rental. I told her I was too busy to assist. That should have been the end of it. But she started flooding my messages with complaints about how lonely and unfortunate she was, playing the victim. I treated her messages like spam and ignored them, but she persisted. Soon, her tone changed. Flirty texts, romantic emojis, and heart symbols started appearing. I shut it down immediately, making it clear that her behavior was inappropriate and needed to stop. She pleaded to stay in my life as a friend, but I firmly told her that I already had a best friend, my wife, Jenny. For a short time, she backed off. But it wasn't long before she resumed sending romantic messages and social media reels. I warned her that if she didn't stop, I would have no choice but to block her. I told her outright that my wife was uncomfortable with our conversations, and that I would not do anything to jeopardize our relationship. That seemed to finally drive the point home. Last week was my anniversary, and I wanted to make it a celebration Jenny would never forget. I surprised her with a trip to the Bahamas. I even recorded her reaction when I revealed the destination and shared it on social media. I went all out, booking a luxury beachfront suite, arranging a candlelit dinner in a secluded forest, setting up a floating breakfast, and planning several romantic experiences in the Caribbean. Normally, I don't post much online, but this time, I made sure to document every moment with heartfelt captions. Was part of me doing it to send a message to Aria? Maybe. Call it petty if you want. But I needed to make it abundantly clear that I was thriving with Jenny. And guess what? It worked. After seeing those posts, Aria stopped reaching out entirely. She even unfollowed me on all platforms. I felt relieved. It finally seemed like she got the message. Now, on to the fourth update. First off, thank you to everyone who sent anniversary wishes. The trip was absolutely incredible. For those who asked about our itinerary and costs, I've shared a separate post with all the details. As for Aria, I genuinely thought she had finally moved on. Unfortunately, I was wrong. A few days ago, she showed up at my office unexpectedly. When my assistant informed me she was waiting, I deliberately let her sit there for hours before seeing her. In the past, I had met with her right away, and I realized that might have sent the wrong message. When I finally stepped out to speak with her, I kept it brief, acting preoccupied, and barely acknowledging what she had to say. I wanted it to be abundantly clear that I had no interest in engaging with her any further. She was sinking into despair once more, utterly convinced that her life was spiraling beyond any chance of redemption. Tears traced paths down her cheeks as she lamented her struggles, fixating on the same hopeless thoughts over and over again. Her words circled in a loop of self-pity, and my patience was wearing thin. I pressed her to get to the point, making it clear that I wasn't here to entertain endless grievances. My bluntness struck a nerve. Her face reddened, irritation flickering in her eyes. And then, as I had anticipated, came the inevitable demand: money. Jenny had warned me about this. She had cautioned that Aria's requests had a way of escalating, becoming less of a plea and more of an expectation. She had been right. This wasn't a simple request anymore. It was a presumption, a given. This time, Aria insisted she needed either a house or at the very least $100,000. I wasn't struggling financially, but even for me, such a demand was absurd. I refused without hesitation. I told her plainly that I couldn't buy her a house, nor could I simply hand over such a significant sum. She adjusted her expectations slightly, claiming that $60,000 or $70,000 would be enough to restart her life, secure a home, cover bills, and ensure her children could go to school. Whether she truly believed she was entitled to my money or was simply testing my boundaries, I wasn't sure. But the audacity of it was infuriating. While I sympathized with her struggles, my sympathy didn't extend to funding her existence. She had no right to my resources. She had been the one to walk away, chasing what she thought was a better life. Now, she expected me to pick up the pieces of the disaster she had created. Frustration boiled over inside me as I demanded to know why she believed I owed her anything. In the past, I had helped her, not out of obligation, but out of simple generosity. When I called it charity, fresh tears spilled from her eyes. At that moment, whatever lingering pity I had for her evaporated. I had already done more than enough. I had given her the means to secure temporary housing, time to find a job, yet she had squandered it all. When her sobs finally subsided, she reached for my hand, gripping it with a desperate intensity. "You didn't mean that, right? About it being charity?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. I met her gaze with unwavering resolve. "I meant every word." She shook her head, unwilling to accept the truth. "You're lying. You still love me." I pulled my hand away sharply and warned her never to touch me again. Any love I had once held for her had long since withered. My heart belonged to Jenny and our daughter now, and I had no intention of letting my past threaten the life I had built. Years of suppressed anger surged forward as I reminded her of how she had thrown me aside, chasing excitement over loyalty, choosing fleeting thrills while trampling on everything we had. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with the consequences. Her expression darkened as she rose to her feet. I came here for help, not humiliation. I scoffed. I've done more for you than I ever needed to. You're not a victim. You just refuse to take responsibility for your choices. I won't let you manipulate me into feeling guilty. She had drained the last of my patience. Rather than appreciating what I had already done for her, she had tried to undermine my marriage, to drag me back into the chaos she thrived on. I wasn't playing that game. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her with such force that the walls trembled. As she disappeared down the hall, I called after her, "Don't ever come back." She didn't look back, didn't acknowledge my words, just kept walking. Maybe one day she would understand that hardship breeds humility, but at that moment, the lesson was lost on her. As for me, I was done. I had already instructed my receptionist that Arya was no longer welcome. If she ever tried to step foot in the building again, she would be turned away without hesitation. To ensure there were no loose ends, I blocked her on every possible platform, severing the last ties between us. My life was good, better than good. With Jenny and our daughter beside me, I had everything I could ever need. I refused to let the past cast its shadow over the happiness I had built. Not now. Not ever. This story has come to an end. Sometimes the past comes back to test who we've become. But it's important to remember, helping those who once destroyed our life is not an obligation. It's a personal choice. Forgiveness doesn't always mean giving someone a place in your life again. Sometimes the best thing we can do for ourselves is to close that chapter and move on, protecting our family, happiness, and dignity. Don't let someone else's mistakes destroy what you've spent years building. Remember, self-respect is knowing when to say no to those who once chose to betray you. Life doesn't give second chances to everyone, and it's up to us to decide who we let back in. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you liked this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you. Betrayal that changes everything. A decision with no way back. Luke always believed in their love, believed that Lillian was his anchor, his unshakable forever. But one night brings a truth he can't hide from. Secret messages. A hotel. Room 367. Everything he thought was solid shatters in an instant. What do you do when a knife is plunged into your back, but your heart demands revenge? Luke stands before the door, behind which his past is crumbling to pieces. He doesn't just learn the truth, he comes face to face with it. But this isn't the end. This is only the beginning. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watched this video from. Now, let's get started. Luke sat on the edge of the bed, his eyes locked on the empty space beside him. The silence in the room felt suffocating, broken only by the measured, monotonous ticking of the clock on the nightstand. Each passing second carved deeper into his mind, adding weight to the already unbearable pressure in his chest. His fingers dug into the sheets, his knuckles blanching from the force of his grip. Lillian was gone. Not in the way he had always feared, but in a way that somehow felt even worse. She had spoken about needing distance, time to reflect, to rediscover herself, to breathe before they fully committed to their shared future. Just a short getaway, she had assured him. A brief respite before they embarked on the next chapter of their lives together. But despite her words, a gnawing sense of unease had taken root in him, an inexplicable dread he couldn't shake. He had tried to dismiss the feeling, convincing himself he was overanalyzing things. Lillian had always been his anchor, the one person he could rely on without question. But lately, something had changed. Her laughter no longer carried the same warmth, her touch lacked its usual tenderness, and their conversations had grown shallow, devoid of the depth and intimacy they once shared. The connection that had once defined them was slipping away, and now he could no longer deny it. He had clung to hope, telling himself that things would return to normal once she came back. But deep inside, he already knew the truth. Lillian wasn't just drifting from him emotionally. She had physically walked away from their marriage, and now there was no escaping that reality. A few hours earlier, his phone had vibrated with a message from the private investigator he had reluctantly hired. The report had been damning, a meticulous breakdown of Lillian's whereabouts over the past few days. The places she had gone, the choices she had made, and the man she had chosen to spend her time with. Luke had read the words over and over, his mind rejecting them even as the truth settled deep into his bones, cold and unrelenting. She had checked into a hotel, room 367. His hands trembled as he set his phone down. He wanted to believe there had been some mistake, but there was no room for denial. The facts were irrefutable, printed in stark black and white. Lillian had betrayed him. A surge of anger rose within him, unraveling years of love and trust in an instant. He had given her everything, his patience, his unwavering faith in their future, his heart, and she had chosen to deceive him. Luke's fists clenched as he forced himself to breathe, steadying the storm inside him. Enough. His gaze drifted back to the empty side of the bed, but this time, the ache in his chest felt different. This wasn't just about her betrayal. This was about reclaiming himself. He had spent too long holding on to a love that no longer existed. He had lost too many moments to a dream that had already crumbled. His decision was made. Luke rose to his feet, his body tense with resolve, and strode toward the door. Without hesitation, he pulled it open and stepped through, slamming it shut behind him. The sound echoed through the apartment, a definitive punctuation mark to the chapter that had just closed. The night dragged on, but sleep never came. The silence inside the apartment pressed down on him, a heavy reminder of all that had been lost. Memories surfaced, his wedding day, whispered promises, the laughter that had once filled these walls. Now, it all felt distant, like an illusion he had been foolish enough to believe in. As the first light of dawn crept into the apartment, Luke found himself in the kitchen, his body weighed down by exhaustion. He poured himself a cup of coffee, his hands unsteady as he stared into the dark liquid. The space around him, once filled with warmth, now felt hollow, stripped of everything it had once represented. For too long, he had ignored the signs, convincing himself they could find their way back to each other. But the truth was clear now. Lillian had been slipping away for months, and he had let it happen. He had been blind, desperate to hold on to something that no longer existed. But that ended now. He set the coffee down, grabbed his jacket, and walked out without a backward glance. He didn't even bother locking the door. This was it. The end. Luke stepped into the crisp morning air, his breath forming small clouds in front of him. The city stretched out before him, vast and indifferent. But he didn't hesitate. His steps were sure, his thoughts clearer than they had been in a long time. He wasn't running away. He wasn't waiting for explanations that would never come. He was done being the man who second-guessed himself, who accepted lies as truth. Reaching his car, he slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. The low hum filled the quiet, grounding him. He pulled onto the road, the city passing in a blur, but he barely noticed. His focus was ahead, on what was to come, not what he was leaving behind. He didn't know what he would say when he got there. He didn't know how the confrontation would unfold. But none of that mattered. Everything had changed. The man who had once loved Lillian without condition, who had believed in their future, was gone. In his place was someone new, someone who refused to be deceived again. Luke pulled into the parking lot of the Jefferson Hotel, his heartbeat steady despite the turmoil inside him. Taking a deep breath, he gripped the steering wheel before stepping out. It was time to face the truth. Luke had always known this moment would come, the unavoidable confrontation. For too long, the truth had been buried beneath layers of deception, but now it was clawing its way to the surface. There was no escaping it. As he stepped out of his car, each stride toward the hotel felt heavier than the last, his body weighed down by the certainty of what awaited him inside. The lobby was unsettlingly quiet, the receptionist oblivious to his presence as he moved past, his focus unshaken. There was no need for directions. Room 367 was burned into his memory, an inescapable fixture in his mind. His fingers clenched briefly before pressing the elevator button, his touch firm, deliberate. A dull chime echoed in the stillness, announcing its arrival. The metallic doors parted, revealing the confined space within, and Luke stepped inside, his pulse an unrelenting drumbeat in his ears. Each breath came shallow, his chest tightening with the weight of what was to come. The man he had once been, patient, trusting, was nothing more than a memory. There was no turning back now. The ascent felt slow, agonizing, and with every passing second, the reality of the moment pressed deeper into his bones. This could not be undone. When the doors finally slid open, a dimly lit hallway stretched before him. He advanced without hesitation, every step pushing him closer to the moment that would strip away any remaining illusions. As he reached room 367, his heartbeat pounded so violently that it threatened to drown out every other sound. Laughter, muffled and carefree, filtered through the door, accompanied by the unmistakable clinking of glasses. His fingers hovered over the handle, trembling slightly. He had known, of course, had felt it long before now, but to hear it, undeniable proof echoing from behind the door, was a cruelty he had not been prepared for. The voices inside wove together in a taunting melody, and in that instant, the last remnants of doubt crumbled. She was in there, with him. The man who had taken what was once his, the one who had stepped into his place as though Luke had never existed. A crushing weight settled in his chest, pressing the breath from his lungs. Every instinct screamed at him to walk away, to leave before the pain could consume him entirely. But he remained. He would see this through. Drawing in a deep, measured breath, Luke tightened his grip on the handle and pushed the door open. The room was bathed in the dim glow of a bedside lamp, casting soft, deceptive light over the scene before him. Lillian sat on the edge of the bed, her laughter still lingering in the air like the ghost of something long lost. Beside her, a man leaned in, his hand resting against her back with a familiarity that sent a sharp twist through Luke's stomach. It was an intimacy that had once belonged to him. He stood there, unmoving, absorbing the sight of what could never be undone. The man turned first, his amusement replaced by wide-eyed shock as realization set in. Lillian followed, her expression shifting from joy to pale, frozen horror. Her lips parted, but no words came. Guilt flickered in her eyes, but Luke felt nothing for it. He hadn't come for apologies. Silence smothered the room, thick and oppressive. Lillian glanced between Luke and the man at her side, struggling to find something, anything, to say. But what words could exist for this moment? Luke's voice, when it came, was dangerously quiet, his calm a prelude to the storm beneath. "So this is how it ends, Lillian. A cheap hotel room with him?" Her hands twisted together, a nervous habit he had seen countless times before. Slowly, she stood, taking a hesitant step toward him, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Luke, But nothing followed. There was nothing she could say to change this. His jaw clenched, his expression carved from stone. "Do you really think I'll stand here and listen? After everything?" His words struck like a blade, and she flinched as though she felt the cut. A darkness had settled in his tone, one that kept her rooted in place. "Luke, please." Her voice cracked under the weight of desperation. This wasn't supposed to happen. It was a mistake. A terrible mistake. He exhaled sharply, lifting a hand to silence her. He had wasted enough time believing her words, placing faith in lies. That version of himself, the man who had once hoped, was gone. What remained was someone forged in betrayal, someone who had finally reached his limit. "You think you can just walk away from this?" His words were cold, slicing through the air between them. "You think you can do this to me, and then come back, expecting it to be the same?" Tears welled in her eyes, her face crumbling beneath the weight of his voice. But he no longer cared for her sorrow. There was nothing left here, not for him, not for them. "You made your choice, Lillian." His voice did not waver. "Now, I'm making mine." Without another word, he turned away. Each step toward the door felt lighter than the last, shedding the remnants of a love that had been nothing more than an illusion. The man on the bed remained motionless, his expression uncertain, but Luke didn't spare him a glance. This wasn't about him. It had never been about him. He paused at the threshold, the weight of finality settling over him. Then, without looking back, he stepped through and closed the door behind him. "Keep whatever illusion you've built with him," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "But understand this, Lillian. I'm done. No more pretending, no more deceit, and no more us." Without another word, he turned on his heel and walked away, the door clicking shut behind him with quiet finality. That small sound echoed in his chest like a gunshot. His heartbeat thundered in his ears, but the anger that had driven him here, that had kept him upright through the confrontation, was already shifting, transforming into something heavier, something colder. He had come to stand his ground, to reclaim his self-respect, yet as reality settled around him, he realized mere words weren't enough. His world had been reduced to rubble, and she needed to feel every fragment of that destruction. Luke moved down the hallway, his steps controlled, his mind focused on one thought. This wasn't the end. It had never been just about Lillian. It was about taking back what was his. Reaching the elevator, he stabbed at the button, his fingers unsteady. But this time, the tremor wasn't from fear. It was anticipation. When the doors slid open, he stepped inside, his reflection catching his eye in the mirrored panel. The man staring back at him was a stranger. The version of himself who had once loved Lillian, who had trusted her, was gone. What remained was someone different, someone unyielding. The descent felt torturously slow, every passing floor stretching the moment. But Luke didn't look away from the doors. When they finally slid open, he stepped into the lobby with certainty, his resolve unwavering. Lillian couldn't simply walk away from this unscathed. She had made her bed. Now, she had to lie in it. Cutting across the opulent hotel foyer, he approached the front desk. The receptionist barely glanced up, offering a polite, rehearsed smile, but Luke had no time for formalities. "I need to speak to the manager," he said, his tone sharp and direct. The receptionist faltered at his intensity but nodded, motioning toward a back office. Moments later, a middle-aged man with neatly graying hair and a composed demeanor appeared. "How may I assist you, sir?" the manager asked. Luke didn't waste time. "Remove a name from the reservation for room 367. I'm checking out now." The manager's brow knitted together. "I'm afraid that's not possible, sir. Authorization is required from the guest who originally booked the room." A slow smirk tugged at Luke's lips, but there was no humor in it. "And that's the problem," he said, his voice eerily calm. "That reservation? It's no longer hers. It's mine now." Without waiting for an argument, he turned and walked out of the hotel. His decision was final, and there was no undoing it. This wasn't just about leaving Lillian behind. It was about reclaiming everything she had stripped from him, his pride, his dignity, his heart. She had left him broken, but now, piece by piece, he was putting himself back together. As he stepped into the frigid night air, something inside him crystallized. He was in control now, but that wasn't enough. She needed to feel the weight of her choices. She needed to understand that betrayal had consequences. Luke wasn't simply leaving, he was ensuring she could never return. Sliding into his car, he gripped the steering wheel with steady hands. The city lights flashed past his windshield, each one sharpening his focus. By the time he reached the apartment, the wildfire of his rage had burned down into something more potent, a chilling certainty. He didn't hesitate. He walked straight to the door and let himself in. No knocking, no waiting. This time, he was setting the rules. When Lillian appeared, her face twisted in shock, guilt flickering in her wide eyes. But Luke felt nothing for her now. No sadness, no regret. "Pack your things," he said, his tone flat, unyielding. "You're leaving. Tonight." Lillian's mouth parted in disbelief. "Luke, wait." "No." His voice was a blade, cutting through whatever excuse she had prepared. "You made your choice. Now you live with it." He had no interest in listening to her apologies, her feigned remorse. She had lost her hold over him. Be gone by midnight. With that, he turned and walked away. He didn't glance back. Her voice chased after him, pleading, desperate. But he didn't pause. He was finished. The man who had once loved her unconditionally was dead. In his place stood someone stronger, someone who had risen from the ashes of what she had destroyed. The air felt lighter, freer. For the first time in years, he was unshackled. He had walked through the fire and emerged untouched. Whatever lay ahead, he would face it on his own terms. This story has come to an end. Trust is a fragile gift that cannot be restored once it is broken. Luke wanted to believe in the best, but he ignored the obvious signs. His mistake? He clung to the past when he should have been looking toward the future. In life, it's crucial to know when to fight and when to walk away with dignity. Never let anyone treat you as a backup plan. Love is built on honesty, not lies. If someone betrays you once, they will do it again. And the most important thing you can do for yourself is let go and never look back. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.